iTestify is about testifying of what Jesus Christ has done and can do in each of our lives. Through testimony of people just like you and through study of His Word, our prayer is to encourage each follower of Christ to be a light in this world. So let your light shine before men, that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. Matthew 5:16.
Hi, thank you for joining us on iTestify today. Today we are interviewing Richard, or Dick Schaefer, and you are the historian for Loma Linda University, correct?
That's correct.
Awesome. I see you brought a stack of books here. It looks like you told me that you've written all of these.
Yes, these are a few of the books I've written. I've written about 20 or 25.
Wow. I'm actually was a nursing student. I see one right there that says School of Nursing, so I'm going to have to read that. So you came here today to tell us about how God has led you in ministry and in particular as a student missionary.
Yes.
And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, first of all, I was born here in Loma Linda, up on the hill in what is now Nickel Hall, and almost 77 years ago.
Wow.
And I first came to Loma Linda about 5 years later when my parents built a home on Mountain View Avenue so that my brother and I could get a Christian education starting in the first grade. And there are two things I remember about Loma Linda from when I was 5. One of them is a concrete berm that went around the southwest edge of the hill. It was like holding the hill up. Now, half of that has been replaced with a sidewalk, but the other half is still there. It's across from the barber shop. The other thing I remember about Loma Linda is that Loma Linda is a special place on earth. Now, how did I get that when I was 5? Maybe it was something my mother said. I don't know. But now I have been employed here for almost 52 years, and I can tell you Loma Linda is a special place on earth. And if we have time now or later, I can go over providences that I have documented starting almost 4 years before any Adventist set foot in Loma Linda, clear up to today, the funding of the new university hospital, the bond funding. But I'd like to go back and talk about personal experiences and things that happened to me when I was a teenager and when I was 20 years of age, which really strengthened my faith as a young man, as a Christian. There was a man named John Ford who was an evangelist in San Bernardino, and as a result of a series of meetings he had there, some of my family became Seventh-day Adventists. My parents went to a program in the university church, and they heard John Ford talk about his latest ministry. It was called International Educational Recordings. And what he did was he found a failed toy. It was a gramophone. And he bought that, and he made records, 7-inch red vinyl discs, recorded at 45 RPMs. And our job was to find Indians who had learned Spanish, who could speak the Indian dialect without a foreign accent, that would make their message more readily acceptable to the hearers. And then we would send those records back with the gramophones. Now, there is a Seventh-day Adventist church inside of Guatemala, at least one, is a direct result of the gramophone ministry. And that was the recordings of Pastor Moises Tai, who was a Mayan Indian. So it's a church of Mayan Indians in Guatemala. Well, we didn't know, for me it was a culture shock to cross the border. I turned 20 in Guatemala. And we drove in kilometers. We bought petrol instead of gasoline. We paid for it with pesos and lempiras and quetzales. We saw homes with thatched huts and walls made out of sticks. But we recorded the languages of ministerial students at Colegio Linda Vista. We paid them a salary to do this, and we recorded such dialects as Chol, Mixteco, Zapoteco, Tzotzil, and then in Guatemala, Maya Quiche. Then I came back, and there was a minister named Marvin Fehrenbach who had gone to a general conference session with a Campa Indian from Peru. So I recorded in the Campa Indian language. And then I was a student at La Sierra College, it was known as in those days, and I used the radio station and recorded Peter Dawa, who was a foreign exchange student from Africa, so I recorded the gospel in Swahili. But anyway, we didn't know what we were going to meet. We didn't know if we were going to take a Jeep. And by the way, here's Glenn, my partner, Glenn Gee, and me with a gramophone to show you what it looked like. Glenn and I both became department heads at Loma Linda University Medical Center later. He became the director of respiratory care, and I became the director of community relations. So I was the spokesman for the medical center during the infant heart transplant and the proton treatment center. So I worked with all of the wire services, the broadcast networks, news magazines, people from Europe we'd never heard of before. The Baby Faye story was one of the top 10 news stories of 1984. So one day I went to Los Angeles 3 times in one day. I did an interview on Good Morning America. Then I went back to do an interview with Network 9 Australia, that was by satellite. And that evening I did a debate on CNN. Whoever thought that would happen?
Wow.
But we didn't know if we would be taking a Jeep and stringing hammocks on it, or just what we would take. But we eventually crossed the border into Reynosa, Mexico with $14,000 worth of equipment and supplies. That was 1962.
Wow.
So that would be a lot more today.
More today,
Yeah.
right.
One of them was a 1957 GMC 4-wheel drive truck that had a camper on the back and a winch. And it wasn't powered by a battery. It was powered by a V8 engine. So this was a very powerful winch. This vehicle was designed for expeditions. And so when we got to Guatemala, before this all happened, we were in an automobile accident, and my head went through this windshield.
That's where your head went?
That's where my head went.
Wow.
And this is my twin brother helping me, and you can see there's some blood on the ground there. It took 250 stitches to put my face back together again.
Wow.
Wow.
My doctor pulled my flesh apart and saw that I had an eye in there and said, "You're a very lucky boy." He thought I'd lost my left eye.
Oh, wow.
And this was dead for years. It's normal now. I can feel up there, but there was no feeling for years. I thought, if the old devil doesn't want me to do this, then he just let the wrong thing happen, because it made me more determined to do this. So here are some thatched huts with stick walls. And that picture I took in Honduras. I was riding not in a canoe, but a dugout log.
Wow.
I mean, this was pretty primitive. Now, as we went into Guatemala, we were on the Pan American Highway, which wasn't paved at the time. It was a dirt road at that time. And a man held his hand up and he said, "No hay paso."
Can't pass.
Well, what does that mean?
You cannot pass, right? Or
I wasn't real fluid in Spanish, but it didn't sound good. So he says, "We have this 4-wheel drive truck with a winch on the front. Can we get through?" He wanted us to go back to Chiquival and then into Guatemala City. He said, "Yes, but road is very bad." So we decided to try it. I mean, we're young guys. We were adventurous. And a little boy tried to stop us, and he talked about a mudslide. So we asked him to show it to us. He showed it to us. It was not a problem. We put tire chains on the front tires, and we gave him a pineapple and thanked him for his help, and charged right through that mudslide, no problem. We thought, well, if this is what no hay paso means, that's not a problem. But then we came to a steep place in the road that was about 1/4 of a mile long, and this was right in the middle of the rainy season, so there was a lot of mud and deep ruts. We got about halfway up that, and the truck slid into the bank and stalled.
Ooh.
Well, there was no trees around to attach our winch to. So my two buddies got out. One of them was Glenn. The other was Tom Phelps, who was going to work with a Dr. Philip Cabansag in his little mission station on the northern coast of Honduras. So there were three of us. They got out. I started the truck again, and I got that truck rocking. And pretty soon, the chains took hold and pulled me up to the top. So now we're feeling really good. We're no I paso, no problem. So we had just settled back to the monotony of riding over a bad road when we came across no I paso. Let me tell you what it looks like.
I think it's the other.
That.
Oh.
That was a mudslide that was a serious mudslide. It was probably 12 feet deep on the high side, probably 4 feet deep on the low side, and there was a Jeep buried to its hood where we needed to go. That's what no I paso means right there.
Yeah.
At least you had something to latch your winch onto. You could latch it onto the Jeep.
Well, when we got to the other side, we latched onto the Jeep and we pulled it out.
Oh, you pulled it out.
Wow.
But to get over there, we had to go up the low side of the cut. You can just barely see it to the left. And we winched ourselves up to the top of that, drove past the mudslide and the Jeep, but then when we got down to the other side, we had to go through some pretty deep mud. And we got stuck. I mean, really stuck. Now, we had prayed that if we were ever in any kind of trouble, that we would be helped, that there would be some help nearby. So we saw that there was a good tree on the other side of the Pan American Highway, but our winch wouldn't reach that far. So we had another 75 feet of stainless steel cable. We had 150 feet altogether, and that would reach. So we got that out, and we strung it up and started this winch with a V8 engine in low gear, and that cable picked up off the ground and it grew tight. And then, with a spark of fire, that stainless steel cable snapped and recoiled in both directions to the tree and to the truck.
Whoa.
Oh.
I ducked, thinking it might possibly come through the windshield. It did not. So now we're in real trouble. How are we going to get out of here? And well, there were some Guatemalan farmers that were on a hill in a cornfield watching all this, and they came down and helped us. I didn't think about it at the time, but I think now that was an answer to that prayer. They helped us put rocks under the front tires, in front of all the tires, with their machetes. They cut bushes and they laid them on top of the rocks. Now, if we could get up on that, we could get out. They got a timber and they heaved on the back bumper when we were ready. We got out of there.
Wow.
To the other side, we pulled the Jeep out and left it on. It wasn't dry land. You can see this is not dry land, but it wasn't buried up to its hood in mud.
Wow.
Well, then we went into a place called Peña Blanca, Honduras. And to get there, we had to go through El Salvador. And we stayed at a place, it was Stephen Youngberg's Pan American Health Service. And he was here in this country raising money, and so he wasn't there. And a little girl came in with a head wound. We were the only ones who could help her. Well, Tom Phelps had worked in surgery at Madison Hospital. He had seen surgeons close wounds with stitches. And so he cleaned that wound. It was about 6 inches. She had been hit with by her stepfather with a machete.
Oh.
And there was about a 6-inch wound on the back above her ear.
Oh.
So he cleaned the wound and he sewed her up.
Oh.
We went back the next day, and I'll tell you, I can get emotional just even thinking about what I witnessed. They could not talk to each other. This little girl and this young man, who was maybe 20, spoke different languages, but they were communicating with their eyes.
Yeah.
She was expressing her gratitude. And he was a future Seventh-day Adventist physician. Anyway, We took Tom to Dr. Gabanzag's mission station in Cuyamel, Honduras, and left him off there. We had to get back to Guatemala, and so we found out there was a brand new road. It was a shortcut to Guatemala. That would mean that we wouldn't have to go back through El Salvador. So they said it had been built by Chicago Bridge. It had a nice crown. It was a gravel road. So we headed out on that road from San Pedro Sula, which is one of the deadliest cities on the planet right now. And we would wave at the people. If they waved back, we would feel good about that. And it got dark. And ahead in the dark, we could see a light on the left. And as we approached, we could see it was a brand new American service station. Now, it was brand new because the road was brand new, but all the other service stations in Honduras were Shell or Standard Oil. They were American service stations, so that was not a surprise to us. That was not a miracle. But what happened was, immediately, we waved at them, they waved back, so we felt good about that. Immediately, my partner heard a noise under the truck. So we had a big flashlight that would plug into the cigarette lighter. He went under the truck and he came back and he says, "We're in serious trouble." He said, "The spring assembly is about to come apart from the frame." There were 4 connectors, 3 of them had broken and 1 was stretched. If that had come apart, it would have been a major breakdown. So we were only about 100 yards away from the service station. I didn't think of it at the time, but now it seems like that was an answer to prayer, that we were close to help when we needed help. So we went back, we were able to leave our truck there overnight, where it would be safe. And there was a car going back to San Pedro Sula. That was part of this answer to prayer. They took us back. We bought some machine bolts, found another car that took us back to the truck, and we had a little come-along, which is a very small winch that where we could pull the frame and the assembly back, this spring assembly back, and we repaired that. Well, then we got back on the road. Just within a few miles, that road stopped. And there was a Jeep trail. We found ourselves on a very steep Jeep trail going down, and there was a stream at the bottom that had washed out part of the Jeep trail. We kind of bounced into that and came out on the other side, and we didn't think we could ever get back. So that meant now we're committed. We spent 3 days on what we call the Devil's Highway. It was so bad. One day we found a truck right in front of us, and we couldn't pass them. It was a big truck with dual wheels. It was a stake bed truck, and the men told us that they couldn't get through because there was another truck coming this way from Guatemala that was buried to its axles in mud. The brakes were soaked, and the owner was gone. There was no way we could get around that. And so we told them, we have a winch. We can get that truck out of there. So we backed up enough so that we could get past them, and we faced that truck. We winched it out. But now it's in our way. We still can't get by it. So with the help of these men, we widened the road. We dug away from the mountain, threw it over the edge. I mean, not only did these people provide manpower, but they had picks and shovels. That was an answer to that prayer when we needed help. We got it. Well, then we saw the Mayan ruins of Copan, and there was it was only the religious part of the city was left. They had a pyramid, there was an amphitheater. It was pretty spectacular. But one night, we were driving late because we wanted to get to Guatemala, and there was a fence across the road. And it was a barbed wire fence, but it was the kind that you could take down very easily. And so we found on the other side of this fence was a river, 200 feet across. We could see where the road went into the river, but we couldn't see where it came out on the other side. Well, wouldn't you know, there's this campfire over there, and there's men around that campfire. And so we decided to go talk to them and see if it was possible to get our truck across this. Now, again, this is in the middle of the rainy season, so there was a lot of water. It was 3 feet deep. I got behind a boulder, and water was boiling over both sides of the boulders. It was rapids. My partner and I were separated by about 10 feet, and we had to shout to be able to communicate. Well, we finally made it across there and talked to one of the gentlemen. He said, yes, you have to go upstream, and then the road comes out at an angle. Well, we couldn't see that from where we were. So he even volunteered to help us. He went back in the water with us. We walked over, we gave him our flashlight plugged into the cigarette lighter, and he helped us to get across that road. Now, we had 3 feet of water hitting the side of the truck. I could feel the truck moving. Now, what would happen if the spring assembly had come apart right there? We would have lost the truck. We may have lost our lives. Mm-hmm. We got out to the other side. Now, the miracle was, as I've said several times, this was right in the middle of the rainy season. It rains 2 or 3 times every day. Downpours. The first day came. No rain. All night long, no rain. The second day came. No rain. For 3 days and 3 nights, there was no rain. There were clouds and there was lightning, but there was no rain until we got to safety. And then it rained. I mean, it cut loose 3 days worth. When we got to Guatemala City, the water was boiling up over the curbs in Guatemala City. And the Adventists told us they had noticed 3 days without rain.
Wow.
Now, if we'd had 3 days of rain coming down that river, we would have definitely lost the truck and maybe had lost our lives. So these experiences helped to build my faith as a young man. And I was able to tell this story as far away as a worship at Walla Walla College. I told it to service clubs. And it gave me a lot of experience speaking before audiences, which helped me later in my career because I do a lot of public speaking now. Teaching classes. I'm teaching 10 classes. I'm a presenter in 10 classes.
Wow.
In the School of Religion.
I like in your story, it seems like, you had a mission, you felt like God. I said, I liked in your story, it seemed like you had a mission and God was calling you to do something. It seemed like, okay, you're going to get through it, but you see over and over how you needed help and God provided the help and He's with you every step of the way. It's amazing.
Amen.
Yeah.
And when I was 14, I went to a regional meeting at the Loma Linda Bowl. That looked like a miniature Hollywood Bowl at the time. It's now a parking lot. And at that time, the Southeastern California Conference stopped having camp meetings, and they had these regional meetings. And I can remember looking at the Loma Linda Sanitarium and Hospital and thinking, maybe someday I could work here. And I worked here for 52 years almost, 52 years. And I was a finished carpenter when I was in college, and one of my jobs was to work on a home in Forest Falls. And I built the cabinets for the kitchen and the 2 bathrooms, and I did all the finished carpentry. And I was up in the peak of this A-frame, and the owner said, "What are you studying in college?" I said, "I'm studying for a career in public relations." And he said, "Really?" And he called me down from the ladder. Turns out he was the director of university relations for Loma Linda University and the great-grandson of Ellen G. White. He hired me. Wow. I've never turned in a CV or a resume, and I've been here for 52 years.
He hired you when you were at the top of the A-frame.
Pardon?
That's pretty good. He hired you when you were at the top of the A-frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got to be friends.
Must have been the easiest interview.
Yeah. And so I'd like to tell you a personal experience that I don't tell very many people. When I was 10 years old...
Keep in mind, this is televised, so you're telling a lot of
I know, that's fine. It's part of my witness. It's part of my Christian witness. I was 10 years old, and I was riding my bicycle up Mountain View Avenue to our new home. And as I dismounted the bicycle to cross Highway 99, that's now Redlands Boulevard.
Oh, okay.
It was before Interstate 10 was put in. So that was Highway 99, and I had to get off because there was traffic. And as I got off, I had a very unusual experience. It was an impression I got. I was 10, and if I were to put it into words, it would be, "You will someday make a major contribution to my cause in Loma Linda." I said to myself, God just talked to me, and I felt warm inside about that. And then I lost it for 40 years. But when it came back to me, it was like it had just happened the day before. And I could remember saying, God just talked to me, and feeling good about that. So I think about that. I think about these books. I've written about 20 books now. My first book was Legacy. This one, Oliver went with Jerry Pettis to United States Congress, was his administrative assistant, and I inherited some of his responsibilities, including a presentation he made to the employee orientations on our history, our heritage, and we wanted our employees to know about the heritage of the institution. So that meant that I had to study our history even more. And so people then started wanting the information. I started doing more study. I read more books and developed a nice talk. And then the university asked me to make a presentation to the Union Conference recruiters. So I did that, and that led to doing a university Board of Trustees worship. I think it was the longest worship they ever had. But at the end of that, Robert Pearson, the president of the General Conference, said that should be in a book. And Neil Wilson, who was the president of the North American Division, said that book should be published by Southern Publishing. And Jack Blacker, who was the president of the Pacific Union Conference, said that book should be published by Pacific Press. So that motivated me to, and it took 7 years to write the first edition of Legacy. Now it's been updated over the years.
We just have a minute left, but maybe you could briefly just share maybe the overall idea about what these books are about.
Okay. This book, Legacy, was first of all published by Pacific Press, and then I published the rest of them. It has sold almost 300,000 copies, no, more than that. This is the next books that I wrote were the School of Dentistry's 50th anniversary book. That's a coffee table book. The School of Nursing's 100th anniversary book. No, this is the School of Dentistry's book.
Yeah.
And then I wrote the School of Medicine's 100th anniversary books. These two were published by the Review and Herald Publishing Association, and there were about 4 others that I contributed to. And then when Dr. Lynn Behrens asked me to become the historian, she wanted some biography. So this is a biography on George Rue, who built the Seoul Sanitarium and Hospital, and this is on Harold Shryock, who became the dean of the School of Medicine. And one of the latest books is on the Beam of Hope, on the Proton Treatment Center. And the very latest one is volume 1 is what's going to be 5 volumes on unabridged history of Loma Linda.
Wow. 4 more volumes to go. That's quite an undertaking.
Well, volume 2, 3, and 4 have been written and edited and designed. They have yet to be published. And volume 5 I'm working on right now.
Well, Dick, you've led a very, very fulfilled life, and we thank you so much for
You're
coming
very
on.
welcome.
And
Thank you.
we
Thank
can
you for
see how
inviting
God
me.
has led in your life. I think it's amazing the trials that He's taken you through, and in when you were so young too. So we just want to say to our viewers that when you have trials in your life, you can count on God. Join us next time on I Testify.